Maybe we should wait in one more minute or something and let people come in.
Susan, we
Yes.
had a meeting with Rabbi Dave Stan,
Yeah.
and people are a little late getting in.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well, I thought today, because Hanukkah is tomorrow night, that we would do a special little session on Hanukkah. And I wanted to talk about, first of all, the real story of Hanukkah, which is also, I'm letting you know now, is going to be, I have to write the Shabbat message this week, and I will be including that as part of my Shabbat message. So if you read it, I don't know if you read those rabbi messages, but you can say, oh, she already told us this, but most people don't know this. So I'm just letting you know. And then I want to talk about a hero, a Hanukkah hero that most people don't know about, a woman, Judith. And there's an entire Megillah of Judith, and we're going to talk about that as well. But first, I want to start with the real story of Hanukkah, but I want to also start with a blessing of studying with you. So please join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, to be engaged in Torah, the study of Torah. Okay, so the real story of Hanukkah, and what you're going to find out is that the oil and the miracle of the oil was not included as a tradition until hundreds of years after the Hanukkah story. That was not the miracle of the oil was actually fabricated by the rabbis of the Talmud hundreds of years later. And it's very interesting why. And it doesn't really negate lighting candles, because candle lighting was part of the original Hanukkah celebration, but it just didn't have the miracle of the oil component. So I want to start all right, first I have to share screen. And I'm going to Hanukkah, the real story. Okay. Is this too small? Should I make it bigger? Can I make it bigger?
No, it's fine.
I'm just going to make it a drop bigger in terms of, okay, let's just make it, where do I do this? Hold on here. Yeah, I think that's easier. Okay.
That's perfect.
Yeah. All right. So let's start. First of all, what was it like? The Hanukkah story is around 162 BCE. That's, but the whole Greek culture came into being because of the conquest of Alexander the Great, who took over, half the world in his empire. So what happened was, oh, it's so nice to see Susan. Alexander, when he died, he divided his empire. His empire was divided among three of his generals, who basically became emperors or kings of this section of his empire. And the Seleucus, we see the first sentence says in 200, Seleucus, or Seleucus was the general who inherited this section with Syria and Judea. Around that whole area belonged to this general, and his descendants or heirs became the kings. It's like they were generals, but now they became emperors or kings, and then it was along their line. So we'll start with this. Okay, so Merle, why don't you start?
If I can read, my eyes were dilated this morning and it still hasn't worn off.
Oh,
in 200 BC, the powerful Seleucid Empire took over Judea, an area encompassing parts of what is now known as Israel and the Palestinian territories. The Greek-centric kingdom was founded by Seleucus, one of Alexander the Great's top military officers, and had steadily expanded outward from its capital of Antioch in modern-day Syria.
Okay, but even though, because we always refer, to the Antiochus and the conquering the enemy as the Syrian Greeks. And that's always confusing. It means they were Greeks, but they were located in Syria and Antioch. But they were of the Greek culture and Greek people, but they ruled everywhere, including Syria. And
Is that Antioch of Epiphanes, Rabbi?
Yeah, that's who we're talking about. He is descended from the original Seleucids. Okay, one more. Go ahead.
Some Jews embraced aspects of the Seleucids' Hellenic culture, but when Antiochus IV
Epiphanes
ascended to the Seleucid throne in 175 BC,
it should be BCE, but whatever. Go ahead.
BCE. He initiated an explicit program of Hellenization in the Jewish territory, promoting the values of worldly knowledge, physical beauty, hedonistic indulgence, and polytheistic spirituality.
Okay, so before this, I mean, when the Greeks sort of conquered Judea, people embraced parts of the Greek culture. What if it was their clothing? You know, a lot of them wore the short kilts and the sandals, like the way we see the way Greeks dressed. So a lot of them spoke Greek, kind of like, you know, America. They integrated and they incorporated some of the Greek culture into their daily lives. Now, part of this Greek culture included worldly knowledge and, you know, like philosophy and study beyond Talmud and Torah and whatever. Physical beauty, as we know, they worship physical beauty. We can look at their sculpture and you see how everybody's idealized to have the perfect, most beautiful bodies. And also their sports, they did sports in the nude, completely naked, because they thought like the marathons were run naked. And hedonistic indulgence, you know, means pleasure, any kind of pleasure, eat, drink, sex, dancing, wine, women, song. They supported that. And
sounds like today.
That's right. And polytheistic spirituality means multiple gods. Okay. Now here, just one more sentence, Merle. Antiochus's measures
were welcomed by some local Jews.
So a lot of there were Jews who, we have Jews today who have Christmas trees, who are secular, who are they say, yeah, I'm Jewish, but I'm American. I mean, we think things are only like they are now, but they've always been this way. And a lot of them said, sure. I like this culture. It's a lot more fun and enjoyable than strict Jewish culture, strict religion. I like it. So a lot of them embraced it. Okay.
Barbara Streisand, James Brolin, Christmas tree, the Hanukkah menorah.
Okay. All right. Pam, do you want to read? Okay, hold on. Where am I? Right here. Initiative.
The initiative and impetus for this often came from locals themselves, said Shay J.D. Cohen, professor of Hebrew literature and philosophy at Harvard and author of From the Maccabees to the Mishnah. They were eager to join the general global community.
Continue.
For example, the Jewish high priest who served as religious leader and political ruler of the semi-autonomous Judea welcomed the construction of a gymnasium in Jerusalem, where Seleucid military officials practiced traditional Greek exercise in the nude alongside local Jews, including priests. Antiochus also encouraged the development of the Greek educational system in Jewish society. A growing number of Jews began to worship Greek gods too.
Okay, yeah. Read that one again. I'm sorry, I cut you off. A growing
number of Jews began worshiping Greek gods too.
So this was a pretty attractive culture in certain ways. Okay, the gym, the beautiful gymnasiums, if you've ever seen them, they have massage rooms and they have baths and steams and they exercise. And actually, I don't know if it's in this text, I can't remember, but some young Jewish men tried to reverse their circumcision because it was a desecration of the perfection of the body. And so they tried, it's like, and it looked, different than all the other Greek athletes. So That we know that for a fact. They tried to do that. But what's fascinating is that the high priest, the Kohen Hagadol, who ran the temple, he at that time there was no king because the king was, Antiochus Antiochus. So the political ruler, under him was also the high priest, and he was a pretty modern high priest. If he said, yes, build a gymnasium, and the priests even went to the gymnasium. And then they encouraged a Greek educational system, which was probably learning Greek and philosophy and maybe the Aristotelian way or whatever. So, and then some people probably didn't give up the Jewish God, but also included the Greek gods, because there's statues, there's altars, and each god, as opposed to one god for everything, you could sort of select which god you wanted to worship for what your needs were. And I can certainly imagine women, though there's no documentation, wanting to have some kind of fertility goddess, or household god that was particularly looking over their home, their children, their fertility, their babies. I can see that being extremely attractive. And if we look at the Micha Mocha, even though that was written, hundreds of years before, almost 1,000 years before, it says, Micha Mocha et Bailim Adonai, who is like you among the other gods, Adonai, because there were always other gods, and there was always an appeal and interest in other gods. And we know that today there are Jews who are Buddhists, and I have a cousin who was a complete Hindu, even though he was Jewish. He believed in all those Hindu gods and whatever. So just like now, different people tended toward, multiple belief systems while remaining Jewish. And you were Jewish by the fact that you lived in Judea. That was like saying you were an American because you lived in America. A Jew was a person who lived in Judea. You weren't necessarily only defined by your religious practice. Okay.
May I ask you a question about this?
Yes.
We already talked about Yeshua when we read in the Torah, and before the ark, when we say Sarah and Abraham and Leah, we mention Yeshua.
We don't mention Yeshua. We do not.
In the prayer.
No, we never mention Yeshua. We never.
In the bottom, his name is mentioned in the prayers every Friday.
No, it's not.
His name.
It's not. It's not.
It's not that I can look when I see you in the temple. I'm going to show you.
Okay, you show me. Okay. Meanwhile, do you want to read this, Jonah?
Oh, sure. Where are we at?
The rising influence of Hellenism.
The rising influence of Hellenism was immediately a source of.
Not immediately.
Upon conflict within. I have some cheap glasses. Sorry. Conflict within the Jewish community. In fact, Hellenism permeated even the most traditional circles of Jewish society. And one, hold on, I apologize because I have a small font. To a small degree or another. A typical Judean would have worn Greek robes and been proficient in the Greek language, whether he was urban or rural, rich or poor, and a pious practitioner of the Mosaic faith. I understand the daughter of Pilate.
Or a dabbler in polytheism. So
gotcha, I couldn't pronounce that. Thank you.
That's okay. Typical Judean, wore their clothes. They spoke Greek, and they lived in the culture just like all Americans, except for the ultra religious. And we would have, the really religious, and probably at that time too. We wear jeans, we wear T-shirts, we wear sneakers. We all dress the same way. Pam, do you have a question?
I do. Well, I just wondered about the language, because Greek is an Aramaic language, right? We have similar, almost same alphabet, no?
No, not at all. Their
because
alphabet,
it's Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, right? Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet.
Yeah, but I think the script is different. You're right. Maybe some of it is in that respect.
But the spoken language, I think, is the same letters. Like if you say the letters, they sound the same.
That's
rather
true.
than maybe how it's written down.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, I think Yeah, I mean, they probably learned Greek in school. They spoke Greek in the marketplace. I mean, people were multilingual in the ancient world, I think. So,
Just
yeah.
wondering if there was a much, much, much earlier contact among the peoples, because they're not really geographically that far. So
Yes, there was trading. There was trading from, way before that. There were the merchants who traded probably with Greece. They traded with Phoenicia, which is Lebanon today. They definitely went to Egypt for trading and things like that. We know that they had traders in the Torah. They talk about selling Joseph into slavery to Ishmaelite or Egyptian traders who were crossing, going to Egypt. So I'm sure that there was contact before this, but not conquest, not
right.
being conquered, where now like everything is in Greek, like all the official documents or whatever would have been in Greek. And so people would have had to learn that. Abby.
Wasn't this when the Septuagint was written?
I think it was written actually later, but I thought it was written.
But it was in Greek. It was written in Greek.
It was written in Greek.
But this was before the Septuagint.
Okay, yes, I believe so. I'm pretty sure because the story of Judith is in the Septuagint, and her story supposedly took place in 100 BCE.
So this was
this is like 200 BCE we're talking about.
So this.
Thank you for the study, Rabbi. This is amazing.
Okay, I'm going to just look up right now.
Yeah, I'm just curious when.
I am too.
They
Septuagint.
Said 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. I just looked it up.
So it was at the same time?
Well, probably, yeah. Well, that's interesting. It was written in that time, but the story of Judith is in the Septuagint, and they're saying that took place at 100. So, I mean,
well, the story of Judith. Oh, Judith.
No, you're right. You're right. This is curious. Maybe they added it. The full Greek, it was translated in 285 BCE. Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah,
By 70, okay, for those who don't know what it is, a Greek king, Ptolemy of Philadelphia, asked 72 Hebrew translators to translate the Bible, the Tanakh, into Greek, and they put them all in different places, and they all translated it exactly the same, and that became the official Bible. So that does not square with my information about the book of Judith, but I don't know. I'll have to go.
Yeah, but I just knew that the Septuagint was written in Greek
at that time when Greek culture was flourishing, I guess, in Judea.
But it's sort of interesting because, well, I don't know where we're going because I don't know the history that well, but then they didn't like the Jews, right? The Greeks.
Well, there was no real conflict until this Antiochus, which is in 165. So no, they lived in harmony for a while, so actually people loved Alexander the Great. This may have been done during the time of Alexander the Great.
Yeah, I think it was Alexander the Great.
Because we know that Judeans named their children Alexander and Alexandra, and he was so he believed in complete tolerance, religious tolerance. He didn't impose, any Greek religion on any of the nations that he conquered. Basically, what they want were tribute and taxes, and resources. They want, the riches. They don't care about the belief system as long as you're paying your tributes and taxes.
So these were the people that stayed in Judea.
They had come back.
They had come back from Babylon.
Come back in like 450.
Okay.
My grandson's name is Marcus Alexander.
They come back, though many stayed in Babylonia.
Right, many stayed. Most stayed.
Wow.
Most stayed, but because they came back and they rebuilt it. Certainly a couple hundred years later, there was a flourishing country.
Right. Okay.
So,
you're so smart, Rabbi.
I'm just trying to get it in.
I feel like I could know so much more.
No,
But my
every,
grandson's
I
name
mean,
is
there's always
Marcus
so much more to
Alexander.
learn, you know?
I know. Okay, Abby, why don't you read?
Okay.
Becoming more
Was
Hellenized.
Marcus.
Okay, becoming more Hellenized didn't mean they were less Jewish as a result. What might this? Said Eric Grun, an emeritus history professor at University of California, Berkeley, and author of Diaspora, Jews Amidst Greeks and Romans. Most Jews didn't see Hellenism as the enemy or any way compromising their sense of themselves as Jews.
Which would kind of be like American Jews. You know, we're
Yeah.
part of the American culture and we remain strongly Jewish, even though I mean, when I was a kid, we didn't have a Christmas tree, of course. We used to drive around in Chicago, which was a really Catholic city, especially when I was growing up, and see the most beautiful Christmas decorations. And we loved seeing them. You know, we enjoyed the the predominant culture. Okay, keep going, Abby.
Thanks,
Okay,
Susan.
so what went wrong? Eventually, Antiochus and his Jewish allies, including the high priest Menelaus, pushed the most pious Jews too far. Menelaus embarked on a campaign of radical Hellenization in 167 BC, prohibiting fundamental Jewish practices such as circumcision on pain of death. He also introduced foreign rites into the Jewish temple, forcing Jewish pilgrims to sacrifice pigs, which are profaned in Judaism. He built an altar to Zeus on top of the sacred altar to the Jewish god Yahweh. Prostitutes were allowed to solicit their services freely on the temple grounds.
Okay, this is pretty shocking.
It is.
And that he was the Kohen HaGadol, the high priest. But then let's read the next paragraph, Abby.
Okay, it's unclear whether Menelaus acted on his own volition with the Seleucids' backing, on Antiochus' orders, or some combination. Some scholars believe Antiochus' efforts in Judea were part of an empire-wide attempt to consolidate his power by uniting the disparate territories under a common Hellenist banner.
So maybe he was forced, maybe he wasn't. We don't know. I mean, it was such a long time ago, but certainly if you read the book of the Maccabees, which we're not going to be able to do today, but if you would look it up, because that's another book that was not included in our Tanakh, it's written from the point of view of the Maccabees, and they talk about, they are more religious Jews, and they are just horrified by the secularization and the Hellenization of Judea and how radical it became. I mean, it seems that, they say it all came from Antiochus, and that he even sent an army into Judea to enforce it, a Syrian Greek army, and they would kill people who were still practicing circumcision, and they would, imprison and, destroy people who were trying to study Torah. Everything was forbidden. It became in this idea of, no, we all have to be the same. We all have to worship the same God. We all have to follow the same religion. And, that's still happening today. And it's happened through history, where you try to conquer. The Catholic Church did it. Islam did it, where, you either worship the way we believe or we're going to kill you. So
it's terrible.
It's terrible, as we know. Okay. Let's see. Okay, Rebecca. Oh, did you have a question, Rebecca?
Yes, I was wondering, is there a difference between Greeks and Greek Syrians or Syrian Greeks? Because when I've read the Hanukkah story, I've read both Greeks and Syrian Greeks. They're the same.
Yeah, they're Greeks who live in Syria. It's like American Italians, Italian Americans, Jewish American. They live in Syria, but they identify as Greek ethnically, religiously, culturally. Okay, why don't you read? Right here, Rebecca.
Others argue that the king's courtiers, most likely including Jewish officials such as Menelaus, put him up to it. Those officials may have sought to reform the religion in the manner of the king, Cohen said. By one way or another, the tyrannical measures were too much for traditional Jews, prompting them to fight rather than acquiesce to the authorities' demands.
Okay, one more.
They actually rebel only when the religious persecution reached a level they could no longer tolerate, said Cohen, who also chairs Harvard's Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations. The line in the sand seems to have been the Torah and the commandments and the profaning of the ritual of the temple.
Right. So when they were sort of bringing Greek culture in, they said, okay, we can coexist. But when they started saying no Torah, no circumcision, no Jewish holidays, and started erected images of idols and sacrificed pigs in the temple, that was it. That's when the rebellion became absolutely essential. People said, no, we're not going to go any further. And again, it's interesting because later against the Romans and against the Greeks, the Judeans are one of the rare groups that rebel. There are, all these cultures and countries that sort of go along, and the Jews, stiff-necked, not going along, refuse to give up our culture. And probably because of them and also the rebellion against Rome, we're still here because we could have very easily assimilated. We could have very easily intermarried and followed what everybody else was doing, but we didn't. Abby.
I just have one question. The one that I read, it said that Yahweh was their God. So was this a time?
Well, this is from a historical thing, but we don't even say that word.
Oh, okay. So was this a time of so I guess it was still a time
it's
of
Adonai.
multiple gods.
It's Adonai. That's just a primitive trying to pronounce Yud Hey Vav Hey, which is really unpronounceable. That's what they're calling Yahweh. We don't say Yahweh. There's no way to pronounce Yud Hey Vav Hey, really. And if you're religious, you never pronounce it. You wouldn't even, you say Hashem, which means the name. When people say Hashem, that literally means means the, Shem means name. People refer to God as the name. You can't even say the name. You're not allowed.
But at one point, Yahweh was
Wait. Shh. I'm sorry, Abby. No, Abby.
At one point, Yahweh was a god, one of their gods. One of many gods.
Was it?
Yeah. That's what I mean. In my Sunday class, don't we, Rebecca? Isn't Yahweh one of many gods?
I have never heard. Susan,
never heard of that? Okay, I'll ask.
Susan Ehrlich, go ahead.
I think it's the Christian way of trying to sound Yud Hey Vav Hey, because there are the Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's the Christian way of pronouncing Yud Hey Vav Hey. That's what I believe.
Oh, no, but Abby's saying that she thought that Yud Hey Vav Hey was actually the name of a pagan god at some point. I never.
Okay, here it says, Yahweh was an ancient Levantine deity and national god of the Israelite kingdom of Israel and Judah.
Okay, that's Yud Hey Vav Hey. That's our God.
Okay.
But it's not. We don't say Yahweh, and we don't recognize that interpretation. That is Adonai, Hashem, Eloheinu. It's the one, the only, and Yahweh is. Yeah, that's just it's not the way that we recognize. But it is Yud Hey Vav Hey. It's that sacred name that they're trying to just ascribe as any other pagan god, but we Jews don't look at it that way. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's okay. All right. So who was reading? Rebecca, were you reading?
I was reading. I agree with Susan. I think Yahweh is a Christian way of saying Adonai or Hashem.
Right. That's their.
And they take so much out of context and so messed up.
Yeah. Okay. Just read this last paragraph here. Cohen
characterized these Jews not as zealots, but as realists. Until then, they had embraced many Hellenistic norms in their own lives and accommodated the spread of the practices to which they objected, such as foreign worship, among their co-religionists.
Okay, so the religious Jews, they said, all right, we're going to live, we're following a more strict, sort of today, strict Judaism, and we're going to coexist. But once they started to forbid the core elements of Judaism and Jewish identity and Jewish practice and Jewish belief, they could no longer go along with it. And I suspect neither could even the assimilated Jews. I think we live in, a pretty loose, secularly accepted society, but if suddenly the United States said no Torah, no circumcision, no
Oh, hell
kosher,
no.
no kosher, no
Oh, hell no.
synagogues, no whatever, I think most Jews, no matter what their level of practice, would be united and protest and fighting against it. I don't know if we would take up
I'd
arms.
move away.
So, okay, Susan Ehrlich,
Okay. Um,
the Maccabees and the Jewish Civil War.
broadly speaking, the Jews of Judea can be divided into two camps based on their reaction to the prohibition of ancient Jewish rituals and the desecration of the temple. The first camp, the Pietists, were unwilling to comply with the radical measures and supported armed resistance against the high priest Nanus.
Okay, and they were called Hasidim, but not the Hasids of today, but they also were called Hasidim. Go ahead.
The second camp, the Hellenists, either welcomed the changes or didn't care enough to fight them.
So there were people who just said, whatever, I don't care, I'm secular, I want to go along to get along, or yes, it's about time we stop being so different. We should try to fit in, which, as we know, never works anyway, no matter how much we try to fit in. In fact, the French, maybe Germany, but I know under Napoleon and the French, they said if Jews stop becoming so Oriental and become more French, we would be able to accept them more, and they gave them rights. But then that was like the 1805, 1810. By the 1880s, they were like, they're too French. They're too French now. They think they're so French. I mean,
They're jealous. Rabbi, they're jealous.
You can't win.
They're jealous of us.
Well, I don't know what it is. Okay, Susan, continue.
Jealousy.
Pietist Jewish militants coalesced under the leadership of the Hasmoneans, a clan of Jewish priests that fled Jerusalem for the Judean town of Modi'in. Starting in 167 BC, Judah, the third son of the Hasmonean patriarch Mattathias, led a guerrilla war against the Seleucids and their Hellenist Jewish sympathizers, along with his four brothers.
So they did also, if you look in the book of Maccabees, which I've taught a couple times, they talk about this rebellion after this horrendous, oppression, but they forcibly circumcised Jews, they say, who were uncircumcised during this time.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, they were very, upset with the secular or the Hellenist Jews. And they also, I don't know what just happened, fled. Many of them left the cities because it was no longer safe and went and lived in the countryside. They lived in caves. They lived in communities. And there's this fascinating account in the book of Maccabees how the Greek army came upon a group of 1,000 Jews hiding out in the hills, and they attacked them on Shabbat. And they refused to fight back because it was Shabbat, because they were so religious, and they all died. And so then Mattathias and Judah's called the Maccabee because Maccabee means the hammer, literally means the hammer, Judah the hammer, because they would strike in guerrilla warfare and then disappear. But the whole group became called the Maccabees. But anyway, they sort of passed a law or said, we will fight on Shabbat. We will fight on Shabbat or we will all be destroyed. And then they fought to save lives. This is part of a Talmudic teaching that probably came after that. To save your life, you can break any law, certainly Shabbat. But
thank you, Rabbi.
So they changed the law basically and said we can fight on Shabbat and we must fight if we are attacked on Shabbat. Okay, Susan, keep going.
Now, I've heard it's Hasmonean as well as Hasmonean. Which way is there a correct way?
No, I say Hasmonean, but I don't know that it's right because it's called Hashmonaim in Hebrew. So
wow, you're good.
Hasmonean, I don't think it matters. So what you like, go ahead.
The Hasmonean brothers' military successes earned them the nickname Maccabees, likely derived from the ancient Hebrew word for hammer. It's not clear how many Hellenistic Jews fought alongside the Seleucids in opposition to the Hasmonean-led militias, but the priests certainly did not enjoy.
Oh, the pietists. The pietists. The pietists.
Sorry, certainly did not enjoy the support of all Judeans. Though the Civil War did not break down along purely geographic lines, the Hasmoneans had a base of support in the countryside. There were even some observant Jews who didn't side with the Hasmoneans. Years into the war, the Seleucids appointed a new high priest in an attempt to calm the tensions. A group of pious Jews accepted his leadership, prompting the Maccabees to malign them in their accounts of events. Well, thanks to the series of cunning Hasmonean military maneuvers and setbacks for the Seleucids elsewhere in their empire, the pietist militants conquered the city of Jerusalem in 164 BCE. They restored the ancient Jewish rites of the temple, tearing down the altar to Zeus and other pagan gods.
Can't even imagine, like, your Holy of Holies having, idols and sacrificing pigs on it and everything. It must have been so, on so many levels, so unsettling, so upsetting, so shocking. So they finally were able to do it. It was a 3-year war. It was a 3-year war. So has anybody not read? Hold on, let me look. Who has not read? Oh, Daphna and Lori and Diane and Laura. Okay. So how about Daphna? Would you like to read? Hold on, let me get back to it.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, nice to have you. Okay.
I'm doing it on my phone, so the text is very small. I might have trouble, but I'll try.
Okay, we're right here. The word Hanukkah.
Okay.
I can make it bigger.
The word Hanukkah means dedication in Hebrew, referring to the Maccabees' rededication of the Jewish temple, which is believed to have taken place around this time on the Jewish calendar. Judah the Maccabee chose to celebrate the rededication of the temple for 8 days, the same length of time that King Solomon celebrated the consecration of the first temple.
So here's the first 8-day explanation. In the Tanakh, it talks about King Solomon when he dedicated the first temple, in like 950 BCE. They celebrated and they had all of these rituals for 8 days. And so Judah the Maccabee decided to copy him. And also, I wonder if he fancied himself a second Solomon, or whatever, probably, who knows. But that is one of the explanations. Another one that I've heard that I don't think is in this text is that it was a belated celebration of Sukkot, because Sukkot, also 8 days with, the Shmini Atzeret, which is the extra day, but had not been able to be celebrated in the temple for, 3-4 years, whatever, many years. So they wanted to celebrate Sukkot. And in both instances, I think they marched around with the lulav, the estrog, and processions and singing and whatever. So those are the two explanations. This one and the other one I have discovered.
Passover, 8
days. Well, 8, yeah, Passover, but it wasn't near Passover. I mean,
do we know
and
why?
anyway, in Israel, they only celebrate Passover for 7 days. Yes,
do we know why Solomon chose 8 days as the celebration of the first temple?
I don't know. I mean, I would have to go read the text, but maybe it was a traditional time to celebrate. Maybe there were 8 different things he wanted to honor. I don't know, actually. I'm going to go look at that text and see if they explain why, or they just say he did it, and see what historians say. But like a week or more seems to be the standard for, well, that's why the 8 days of Sukkot also makes sense, because that is exactly 8 days, 7 days plus Shmini Atzeret, the extra day. But I don't know it, I have to tell you, but I'll see if I can find out, because I'm curious too. It's a good question. Okay, one more, if you can read it, Daphna.
Okay, what about the miracle of oil? The traditional Hanukkah story is that when the Maccabees arrived to reconsecrate the temple, it was in such disarray that there was only enough oil to keep the sacred 7-branch candelabrum or menorah lit for 1 day. Instead, the oil miraculously lasted for 8 days.
Okay, Lori, do you want to read? Lori, are you there? I saw you there.
I think she's saying no.
Oh, you don't. Okay. Marilyn, do you want to read?
All right.
Okay.
Jews celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days to commemorate this miracle, lighting an additional candle on a special Hanukkah menorah or Hanukkah each night of the holiday. That is also why it is customary on Hanukkah to eat foods fried in oil, like potato latkes and donuts.
Keep going.
In reality, the rabbis likely developed the miracle of oil narrative several centuries after the events of Hanukkah took place. The first mention of the miracle is in the passage of the Babylonian Talmud, dating to sometime between the 3rd and the 5th centuries AD.
Okay, hold on. I want to just make this bigger. Okay, hold on. I don't know why it's. Okay. I made it a little bigger. All right. So want to read a little more? Keep going. Let's see. Where is it? Okay. One more, Marilyn.
Harvard's Cohen said he believed that the rabbis of the Talmud came up with the miracle of the oil in order to demilitarize Hanukkah.
One more.
It gave the rabbis who were uncomfortable with the Maccabees a way to say they respected Hanukkah, Cohen said. Military victory and upheaval were not good lessons for Jews to have living under the Roman Empire. They didn't want little Jewish boys to grow up and try to be Judah the Maccabee and try to attack the Romans.
So there's this idea, I want to just stop for a minute, that they also, he doesn't say this, but they wanted to take the focus off the Maccabees and put it more on God. They wanted to include God in the story more. And so they wanted to have a miracle that had to do with God, as opposed to celebrating the Maccabean military victory over the Syrian Greeks. Not to mention that even when they mentioned this was under the Roman Empire, and they were being ruled by Romans. They didn't want to encourage rebellion, though, of course, they did rebel. They rebelled and the temple was destroyed, and then they rebelled again with Bar Kokhba 100 years later, like 70 years later. But wait, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. The Maccabees became the rulers after this success, and they were not very good rulers. They were corrupt. They were corrupt. They weren't good. And so I think they also didn't want to glorify Maccabees. They weren't priests, and they were priests, but they weren't descended from King David. So they weren't considered legitimately to be rulers of Judea. So for all these reasons, they decided to take the focus away from the military success to something more spiritual, so to speak. Susan.
Yes, I understand that. I agree with it. And the latter-day Maccabees were horrible, as you said, and some of them became priest and king, and they abrogated the power to themselves, and they weren't from David or Zadok either. However, today, I think of the Maccabees, and I think of the IDF fighting evil. And I think we need some strong military force to conquer evil at times. Now, the Maccabees were against the Romans, and as you said, afterwards, it would be pretty dangerous for the Jews to focus on their military strength, because that's what the Romans were afraid of. But their spiritual sense, but I think maybe it evolves back and forth.
Well, I agree with you. First of all, they did rebel anyway. You know, there was a huge uprising against the Romans.
I find it really amazing. And the other thing about that name, that 4-letter name.
Yeah, who's talking?
Pamela?
Who is talking? I don't know what happened. Oh,
But-
okay. I don't know who that was, but they stopped.
Those who despair.
I'm sorry, what? Who's talking?
Maybe if you mute everybody, it often comes from the Zoom user.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm happy, but I just don't know who it is.
I
Um,
wasn't talking.
I think Pamela was the one talking.
Pamela, were you
It
talking?
was Pamela.
No?
No, it
Okay.
wasn't
Yeah,
Pamela.
well, it wasn't me. I mean, although I did just now remute. I don't know why it was unmuted.
Oh, I don't. Okay. Well, in any case, they did rebel, and they rebelled a few times. I agree. I feel like celebrating strong Jewish military success is valuable, especially when you think about the Warsaw Ghetto uprising and the uprisings during the Holocaust, about the IDF, and what's going on. That the miracle of the oil seems very passive or small. It doesn't seem, I feel like Hanukkah is more important than just the miracle of oil burning for 8 days. There's more to it, which we're going to look and see that the text also talks about that. So you're right, but everything reflects at its time. Like, they just didn't want to endanger the Jews, they felt, by celebrating some kind of military victory at that time. But we need to rethink Hanukkah, I think, or embellish it or add it. Now, okay, so what's Diane, do you want to read? I'm gonna get back to that.
Rabbi, what you're talking about, may I say something about the Hanukkah?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And sadly, and during concentration camps, people were gassed, and Corey Ten Boom, a friend of mine, Moshe, was there, and she was released. I think that God is going to use, because it happened with Hanukkah, the oil, that He could use it in this end time here to save Israel. He could use gasoline in our hands against our enemies.
Okay, I'm not sure what you're saying, but
I'll tell you privately.
Okay, Daphna, go ahead.
I'm
I'm
curious.
not sure what you're saying, but
I'll tell you privately.
Okay, Daphna, go ahead.
I'm curious if before this
Okay.
story of the oil.
I'll tell you privately.
Okay, Daphna, go ahead.
I'm curious if before this
Okay.
story of the oil.
Wait, just a second. Hannah, are you there? Because there's something going on with the sound.
Yeah, I'm trying to fix it right now.
Something is off with the recording. Yes, it is. Okay, Daphna, try again.
I'll try again. Sorry, I could hear myself speaking when I wasn't speaking. It was very weird. I'm curious if the story of Hanukkah was considered, like, the miracle was the military victory, and then later the story of the oil was created and that became the miracle, or at what point was the miracle identified as the military victory versus the miracle was identified as the oil?
So, and we're going to read a little more about this. I don't think originally Hanukkah was considered a miracle. I think it was considered an incredible accomplishment and achievement, like
the
4th of July, like 4th of July, winning our freedom, winning their freedom. But what they did do, and we're going to see this in the text, is they did relight the menorah. And the idea of lighting menorahs or candles on Hanukkah was there from the beginning. They were not candles, it would have been oil, lighting oil lamps or something. The idea of lighting oil lamps to celebrate Hanukkah was there from the very beginning as a remembering of relighting the big menorah in Jerusalem at the dedication. So that was how they did it. But there was no literal miracle in the celebration. I mean, Purim is kind of a miracle, but not really. But it's kind of like Purim. We celebrate that Esther saved the people. I think they celebrated the success, you know what I mean, of the war. And then and there was already lamps being lit. And then the rabbi said they wanted to add this other level of spirituality to it, because I guess they were celebrating the military victory and that they weren't happy with that. Okay. Yes, Pamela, share what you're writing. Just tell us.
So I once read, and I'll have to look it up again, but there's I think a Babylonian god or some other god in the general vicinity. And that god was the god of light, and that their name was like Shamash or Shamash or
Well,
Shumash.
Shemesh in Hebrew means sun.
So,
it
but
could have
there
been
was,
the sun god.
yeah, so there it was. And I always found it interesting that that's the light that lights everything else is the shamash candle, right?
Oh,
So,
but that means that's a different. Well, that's interesting. Shamash literally means helper, but maybe it came from Shemesh.
but
That's
we're
really
using the light
interesting.
to light the others. I don't know. I mean, have I studied history of Spanish language way back when I was a tyke. And so I'm always looking at how languages impact other languages and why Sephardi became what it was, and it was this, that. So I'm looking at how these cultures all interact via the language because you bring that with you and then it becomes incorporated into
Of
it.
course, and they may have that would maybe have been one of their other, ancillary gods, Shemesh, Shamash, whatever. That's very interesting. That all the names, not all, a number of the names of the Hebrew months are the names of Babylonian and foreign gods. They're names of gods. Cheshvan is the name of a god. I mean, there's multiple there are month names in Hebrew, but they're all the names of gods. I don't know how that happened, but that's what I guess when they named the months, there were worship or celebrations of those gods going on in those months. Just like August is named for Augustus Caesar, and July is Julius Caesar, and March, though, is for the god Mars. And January is Janus, which is Zeus in Latin. That's Greek Zeus. Janus is, I believe, Zeus, isn't it? Or that's Jupiter. Janus is another god, but in February is probably another god. So people seem to name months after gods, and I'm sure they could have incorporated that idea. That's very interesting. I like that. Okay, let's just try to finish this. I didn't even get to Judith, unfortunately, but here, where were we? Here's what I wanted to say. The use of oil lamp. Oh, wait, I didn't share. Did I? Hold on. Go back. I didn't do share screen.
One thing for Pamela's, I just looked up on Google.
Yeah.
That there is a god, a Babylonian god, Shamash. There's also a Mesopotamian. Well, Babylon was Mesopotamia.
And in Hebrew, the word for sun is Shemesh.
Yeah.
So, okay, so here is the use of oil lamps, however, was a component of the holiday almost from the start. See, they did that from the beginning. Jews celebrated the holiday with the lighting of lamps, according to Maccabees 2, a pro-Hasmonean 2nd century account of events included in some versions of the Christian Bible. I mean, yes, you can download it and read it. It's really interesting, the book of the Maccabees. There's 1 and 2. There's 12 chapters. Josephus Flavius, Josephus wrote an amazing history of the Jews during the Roman times. A Roman Jewish historian in the 1st century AD, what we would say CE, also refers to Festival of Lights in his description of the holiday's observance. So always there was this lighting of lights, which is really beautiful. Everybody was lighting lights. So here's the last sort of conclusion. Penina, do you want to read this? If you're there, I know you're there. Penina? Yes? No? Okay, I'll read it. Unless you come on. Hanukkah remains a relatively minor holiday for Jews. It is far less important than Rosh Hashanah and Passover, for example. However, it has an outsized status in the diaspora Jewish communities, the largest of which is in the United States, where Jewish religious devotion takes a backseat to a sense of cultural pride. That Hanukkah typically falls around the same time as Christmas has also raised its profile. Okay, but let's look at its significance today, and I love this for the end. The oil is a symbol for the Jewish people. After having both of our temples destroyed and losing unity because of their destruction, after being ruled by countless empires, after being kicked out of our homeland many times, after being denied entrance back into Israel multiple times, after being forced to find ways to survive in hostile countries, after fighting too many wars to keep track of, and even after 6 million of us were killed in the heinous Shoah, the Holocaust, we, the Jewish nation, are still around. All the odds were against us, but we persevered, and here we are. One might have expected us to burn out, but we're still here after 4,000 years of hardships. The oil is a symbol of our people's strength, meant to teach us that if we push through troublesome times, we can and will light up the world with our presence. I think that's a beautiful interpretation of contemporary Hanukkah, and I want to wish you all happy Hanukkah. Have a beautiful time this week. And I want to remind everyone that next Tuesday night at Irma's campus from 7 to 9, we're having a night of action. A way to celebrate Hanukkah is to come to the temple, and we're going to have all of these stations where you can call our political officials, you can email. We'll have it very easy where you just have to click on something and add your name to all kinds of petitions and contacting university presidents and all kinds of things. We're going to light candles and have like a 20-minute talk from the head of AJC, American Jewish Committee, the president of it, about what's going on and what we can do, because things are really troublesome and scary right now, and we need to unite and do whatever we can. So if you can make it, I would love to see you there.
I will be there.
Okay, and as Pamela says, may we all continue to bring light into the world and be a light into the nations. And happy Hanukkah, everybody.
Thank you. We love you. Thank you,
Hanukkah,
Rabbi.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank
God
you.
bless everybody. Everybody put in the chat. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Love you. Mwah.